The well of eternal life, an unseen well, can be found in the hidden world of your friend's eyes. Keep looking with an open eye, you shall be received with an open heart. In the windows of your friend's eyes, you will find the path to the well of life. Go and fall with an open mouth and drink the elixir of eternal life. Settle into the joy of your loving heart as you float down the river called paradise. Surrender to the current of infinite calm to reach unity with a blink of an eye.
When did you first, in general, discover poetry as an art form?
Well, I grew up in a very spiritual family, and poetry was part of my parents' kind of way of honoring their spirituality. And, my parents pretty much followed the Sufi kind of path. And Sufi is very well known for poetry. But also at school, we used to have a lot of famous poets. People would come to the school and read their poetry. And I used to pay attention of how the words that poetry transmits to us can really transcend us to a whole new level of awareness. And at the back of my mind, I always knew one day I want to be that poet, I want to write poetry. And when I started writing my first book, A Path to Wisdom, this is where, in parallel to me writing, there were like words flowing through me that I knew they don't need to go in the book, but there has to be something else. And something else were writing poetry. But usually this poetry is so unique because actually each poem is dedicated to one person who's been in my life and changed my life. So I tend to spend about 6 hours in meditation. I tend to pretty much sense this person's soul and then extract almost like their wisdom and put it into a poem so people can, when they read it, when they listen to the words, that can awaken that kind of wisdom this person has developed over a period of time.
Can you remember the first time you acknowledged you wanted to write poetry? And do you remember the first poem you wrote and what inspired it or who inspired it?
Yes, basically, the first poem I wrote, it's in here actually, and it's called I Believe. And it was about Oprah. And, it's sort of, I went to Africa for the first time in 1999. And, I remember we did this student project in Kenya doing HIV awareness. And, it's sort of my perception of Africa changed drastically because, back then we didn't really have social media and all the things we enjoy today. It was pretty very unknown world for me and for the many people we went down there. And I came out realizing how rich Africa is, not how poor that most people perceived it to be, but how poor the mind within the African people is, and how by developing the mind and by developing their consciousness, that could be the next biggest and most powerful continent in the world. So, and then I looked at some of the pretty much Afro-Caribbean kind of people in the world who leading the way in making sure that race or creed or, no matter what the background is, you can follow your dreams, and despite all the difficulties, you can make it. And being a migrant myself from former Yugoslavia, coming to England, where you're considered as minority, as unworthy of love, unworthy of success, unworthy of those things, I pretty much aspire to people like Oprah, who are sharing their struggles and sharing their stuff. So I pretty much dedicated this poem to Oprah.
Awesome. So do you, I guess, are you the kind of person where you sometimes look to write poetry, or do the ideas come to you when you least expect it, or a little bit of both?
I think a little bit of both, but mostly when I meditate, or mostly when I see a story about a person in my life, either a person who inspired me or somebody who tried to crush me and challenge me and, inflict as much pain as they can, frankly. And I get inspired by both, meaning if there was some, I'm going to be writing about 12 books of poetries. And in each book, there'll be like 30 poems, which one poem for every day. So those poems will be a mixture of the people who inspired and challenged me. And for those who challenged me, I will put the kind of wisdom that I pretty much extract out of that relationship, out of that experience in a way that hopefully other people don't have to go through that, or can actually create breakthroughs with this very same people who might causes them pain or challenge, or some kind of separation that they have, maybe with their loved ones, with their family members, with their partners, maybe at work, maybe socially, maybe from life itself. So really, that for me, it's what gives me in the moment inspiration. Like for instance, what's happening in Ukraine. I started to think about poem which promotes peace, but also understanding the role of the war and how war and peace are like two facets of life that we cannot escape from.
All right. So are there any poems or poets you've come in contact with over the years that resonate with you?
Yes, I mean, I mentioned earlier on, for me, Rumi has been a huge influence. And during those times, I think to be able to write such beautiful poetry, it's really amazing. But then, when I started Shakespeare, for instance, and I studied all the work of Shakespeare, that was really wow, play of words. And, so for me, it's this poetry, writing, creating plays and all of those things is what we can use words for, not only changing opinions, transforming lives, but frankly to make people laugh, to ease their pain, to perhaps transform what's going on in themselves so they can actually heal faster, or they can feel better, or they can connect better with themselves and with others.
All right, last question I have for you. Any inspiring words for an inspiring poet who might be, because I mean, there's always been criticism when you share yourself. I think nowadays it's worse. So people may, think they're a poet. They're afraid, what people might think. So they're too afraid to share it. So what gives you the courage to share your poetry? And what words would you give to someone who's written poems, they just haven't shared them yet?
Well, I want for anybody who's considering to be a poet, I want them to consider poetry as music to somebody's ears, because, we all know the power of music, and we all know it's not easy to be an artist, to go out there on stage and perform the entire concert. They have their own challenges, which we don't see. We only see one part of the artist. So, usually, like I see from myself and a lot of the people I studied and read their poetries, pretty much a lot of poets put down in writing their own struggles, but designed into a poetry, their own opinions, their own kind of breakthroughs that they create, or perceptions about reality, about people, about things that matter to them. And, as I said, it's like a music. Just consider yourself to be one of the instruments in the symphony of poetry, which means your poetry could be out there. Even if one person takes something out of it, it's worth writing and sharing your poetry. The ocean of health and light. The long and dark night always ends. The sun always dawns when the daylight begins. Give up the sense of separated self and give birth into the life-giving waters of the union itself. Separated from a world is your pain. Connect with others and be that change. Embrace death as you do life. Accompany illness with the presence of light. Fear of death is what stagnates your mind. Free your imprisoned internal soul and become kind. Trust death as you do life. It will propel you towards the ocean of health and light.